independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
I'm Craig Collins, filling in for Chad Benson today. This is the Chad Benson Show. I will be with you all 3 hours today, and he'll be back on Monday. So let's have a good time. We have to start by talking impeachment. I think it's contractually obligated. I'm here for just a day. They sent over a writer. The only thing, no, I'm kidding. Chad doesn't care what I talk about, but it just seems like I have to talk about impeachment because everyone needs to talk about impeachment. And I really like some audio today. It's Chris Wallace talking to Representative Chris Stewart about this. I have 2 clips to get to in just a second. But truthfully, the conversation is different than the one I think we should be having. The conversation right now, it seems to me, the messaging from Republicans is that this system is flawed, or that the process is screwed, or that the people involved, the witnesses, are corrupt and biased. And all that is fine as an argument, but it's not necessarily as important as, is this impeachable? Is the Ukraine call actually something that deserves to go this route? Did Trump do something that's so bad? And by the way, you'll hear this a lot for the next few days. You've already been hearing it. People keep mentioning crimes and misdemeanors, high crimes and misdemeanors, and there's an argument immediately. People on the left are going to tell you that it doesn't have to be a crime. It doesn't have to be a misdemeanor. It just has to be something that politically we determine is an impeachable offense. And they are right about the idea that impeachment itself is not a legal process. It's a political process. But within the Constitution, they do recommend that we use the power of impeachment for high crimes and misdemeanors. So anyone that tells you that what we're actually looking for is a crime is right. I know that you can impeach someone for anything, and it seems like we're going to try to do that. And maybe moving on, every president is probably going to be impeached from here on out because the other side just doesn't like him, which is what's happening here. But let's get to these clips. Let's hear what Representative Chris Stewart said to Chris Wallace about this. Here's the first one.
So let me ask you, in the abstract, forget the specifics of this case, do you think there's anything wrong with a president asking another country to investigate his political rivals?
I think a more accurate question, if you allow me, Chris, is there anything criminal and is there anything impeachable about that? Now, the truth of the matter is we work with foreign governments all the time to investigate U.S. citizens. We're doing it right now. Attorney General Barr is doing it with foreign governments as they look into the genesis of the 2016 FISA applications and some other things. So that's not unusual at all. But again, I think the more accurate question is this criminal? And I have to tell you that to my knowledge, and maybe they've said something I've missed, although I don't think so, not a single witness has come in and claimed this is actually criminal activity. And the more important question is does it rise to a level of high crime and misdemeanors?
I have to laugh every time I hear Chris Wallace go, whoop, 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 whoop. He loves to do that. It is his favorite thing. But yeah, that's exactly correct. The question is not, is what the president did in that call to Ukraine correct or not? Is that the right way that a president should handle a conversation like that? Is it a bad look that, well, I believe he is authentically trying to fight corruption and gain, a better system in a country that, yes, he was withholding aid from. He wanted to withhold aid until they were willing to confront the vast corruption issues that exist there. And it just so happens that in investigating that Joe Biden's son would be he'd be fairly involved in that, because there is a case that whether or not he committed any crimes did sort of just disappear one day. And so, yes, it's a bad look. Yes, it's a lot more than that, probably, for the president to call another country and say, hey, can you investigate the guy that right now is my biggest political rival? But at the same time, I don't know that that's an impeachable offense. And that's the only conversation that we need to be having. We don't need to talk about whether or not the witnesses who've come forward, the whistleblowers, are people that are, biased, because certainly they are, by the way. Donald Trump was a reality star for years and years and years. And how do you become famous in that world? How do you do a good job on TV every day and get more people to watch you? You say things and do things that create strong opinions. And it's not like he had to practice that. Years and years of being a huge businessman in New York City, of all places, trained him to yet again be the kind of person that had strong beliefs, strong opinions, and vocalize them in ways that maybe a lot of us wouldn't. So it's going to be impossible for anyone involved in this case to have you ever met anyone that has no opinion of the president? Is there anyone out there? I would love it. Someone call in and tell me that you have no opinion, that everything he said you don't agree with or disagree with. You're just completely neutral on one Donald Trump, because that person doesn't exist. But the only question today, the only question we should be asking for the next few weeks, does he deserve to be impeached? And by the way, anyone that's doing this, anyone on the left that hopes that this, somehow prevents him from becoming president in 2020, if you impeach him, and the Senate will never do this. So I'm not saying that this would ever happen. And I know it's been mentioned on this show, this exact fact. But if he were completely impeached, he could still run for office, regain office, and still be our president in a couple years. So I'm confused in so many different ways in the handling of how this has been going and the ways in which even the Republicans are combating it. Because right now it's a very, very simple question. Is what the president did an impeachable offense? Is it a high crime and misdemeanor? Because it should be one. It doesn't have to be one. Politically, you can impeach people for all kinds of reasons, but it should be one. Chris Wallace and Chris Stewart did continue. Here, let's hear a little more from them.
So I was going to say that really it isn't the issue, isn't whether it's criminal, it's whether it's impeachable. So let me ask you directly now. If Democrats were able to make the case the president used his office, I repeat, this is an if, used his office to get Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden. If that were a credible case, is that an impeachable offense?
It's just not, Chris. It's just not. And as I said, we're doing that right now. We are using the office of the presidency to ask other governments to assist us in investigations. There is all sorts of corruption that has gone on in Ukraine since you and I were little boys. That's not a surprise to anyone. And before we release aid, $400 million or more of aid to them, I think it's a perfectly responsible thing to ask. Let's investigate that corruption. And if some of that involves a U.S. person, then I think it's perfectly appropriate to ask questions about that.
Yeah. I mean, some people will feel that it is completely appropriate. Some people will feel that it's not maybe the most appropriate to lead with Joe Biden and his son's name. Maybe if you had done that a little bit differently, Mr. President, and said, can you investigate all the corruption that's taken place, even the high profile stuff in the last few years before we give you aid without mentioning a specific name, maybe it would be, a much different conversation today. By the way, Joe Biden is now not the leading candidate to not in the most recent polls. Is he likely to win in Iowa? And I assume he's not going to be the candidate that actually faces off against Trump. And so to do all this at that time and to assume that no one else would rise above Joe Biden, a guy who can't have a debate without saying something that you shouldn't say, and he does it by accident. Donald Trump does it on purpose. Joe Biden will put his foot in his mouth completely by mistake every time a microphone is in front of him. But now the leading candidate in Iowa, to no one's surprise, is Elizabeth Warren. She has 22% of the vote in a recent poll. Sanders at 19%, Buttigieg at 18%, and then we get to Joe Biden at 17%. By the way, if we're going to talk about Elizabeth Warren today, which I think we also have to, she has released the plan, Medicare for All, that you hear every time we see a debate. Of course, she's capable of giving every single person on this planet free health care. She's not going to raise taxes on the middle class. That would be silly. Why do you need to do that? It's only $52 trillion. Her plan only costs $52 trillion, but she does. She mapped it all out. The ultra wealthy who are taxed at a 3% rate right now, that'll go up to 6%. She's going to boost it up there. So that'll be nice to get a little bit more cash from them. And obviously, if you're really, really rich and we try to take twice as much money from you as we've been taking, you're not going to move. None of the people who are rich enough to do that would leave this country. Why would you do that? If we can take 25% of their money, because of course they don't have the means to just, yes, they do. This is such a flawed plan in so many different ways. By the way, she said that federal spending can come up with $20 trillion. So she would increase federal spending by $20 trillion to make her plan happen. And then the other $30 trillion, we'll get there all kinds of different ways. And we certainly won't raise taxes on the middle class. Not one penny. Don't need to do it. It's just crazy. I wish that we could all live by those rules, right? Where you could just promise anything you want. We don't have to figure it out. I think Sanders even did that, actually. I think his remarks have been, I'm also going to do what Elizabeth does. Her plan doesn't make math sense, so I'm just not going to give you any math. I'm just going to tell you I can do it, and we'll cross that bridge later. Do I want free health care? Of course I do. Do I care how it's paid for? Yes. Unfortunately, I'm one of those voters who actually cares how it's paid for. I have to take a break, but real quick, I do want to talk about the fires in California for just a second, switching gears. It is good news that now 200,000 residents are returning to their homes that were affected by the Kincade fire. But of course, there's yet another fire cropping up. The Maria fire is now an issue, and people are evacuating. I think 7,500 people have had to leave their homes. This is driven by winds of 20 to 30 miles per hour. It broke out last night. It's one of the fastest growing fires so far that they've seen. Anyone out there in California, anyone affected by any of these things, please stay safe. Please evacuate. Please don't wait and cause a rush at the end to get out of the areas where they're telling you to leave. I have a quote here from one of the police chiefs involved in this, saying that they're actually going door to door to notify people, and they're putting out alerts to message people that there's a fire and you need to get out of the area. So please do leave those areas. Do not stay and try to wait it out. And I truly hope these kind of things happen less often. We have to have a better plan to attack this kind of stuff in the future. All right. I'm Craig Collins, in for Chad Benson. More show right after this.
You go, boy.
This isn't about right or left. This is just about right and wrong.
Right you are, Chad. The Chad Benson Show.
This is the Chad Benson Show. I am your host for the day, Craig Collins, filling in, and I had to do a double take. I was watching, of all things, I watch a lot of TV, and I do it for this job, for jobs just like this, where I want to take in every take from every place just to know what it is. I'm watching MSNBC the other day, and I couldn't believe the guest they got on. So they're talking about civility. They're doing a debate on, if civility is dead in today's day and age, and they turn to, of course, an expert in it, Jerry Springer. Jerry Springer is on the show. They throw to him in a serious manner. They do mention, of course, the kind of things he's known for, but they ask him to weigh in. Is civility dead? Here's what Jerry said.
Civility is critical in terms of our norms. And we can't function as a society unless we have norms of how to behave, because you can't pass enough laws to take care of every human interaction. So the norms, if we see our leaders, people have always been cursing, people always get upset, but our leaders, whether they're government leaders, economic leaders, religious leaders, when they misbehave, when they say the norms don't matter, when they say you can use whatever language you want, anything you can get away with it. If you don't pay taxes, you're smart. Demeaning other people. When they have this behavior, it tells society that we really don't have any norms anymore. There's no appropriate way to behave. We can't have that in the leadership of our country.
What just happened? What did I just witness when that happened? Jerry Springer is the expert you want to bring in for this? There's no one else on your Rolodex. There's no one else you can go to say, we're going to talk about civility and preventing, people from being more disrespectful. We want to get the message out. This is MSNBC's plan. We want to get the message out that the rhetoric right now politically is damaging the country. We need to return to a place of being kinder and more respectful of each other. And they asked to have Jerry Springer on the show. A producer needs to be fired. Whoever came up with this idea needs to be canned immediately, because there's zero ways to listen to him say those things about how Donald Trump is damaging society and then know who he is. Maybe the very, very young people in the audience who have no concept of who Jerry Springer is would be like, oh, that guy seems pretty smart. It's kind of like the people that thought that Post Malone discovered Ozzy Osbourne. I don't know if you know that, but a few months ago, Post Malone had Ozzy Osbourne on one of his music videos in one of his songs, and some very young people thought that he had discovered this dude named Ozzy Osbourne. And that's exactly what had to happen here for anyone to take Jerry Springer seriously. You had to have no concept of who he was. If you had even a general idea of what made him famous and how people attacked him for years for what he put on television, how could you possibly ask him? I just can't. I mean, his points, they might have some validity to them, not a lot, but they might have some. But when that guy's saying them, I can't listen to any of it. I couldn't believe it. I might share that again on the show just because of my own amazement of it. You might not be as shocked as me, but I can't envision not having any better ideas than him. By the way, I want to transition to another clip that I have. It's number 12 on my list of clips from my producer. This was pretty funny. There's an activist following a politician after a meeting. Representative Don Young, he's from Arkansas. He's trying to get to an area, or I think he's actually trying to get on an elevator. He's walking down a hallway toward an elevator, and for whatever reason, someone needs to ask him a question, and he's ignoring them. And then at the end of the clip, you'll actually hear him headbutt the camera. Let's go ahead and play that.
Is it okay for the president to pressure foreign governments to interfere in our elections?
Zach will be able to talk to you.
Is that an okay action to happen? Is it okay for the president to pressure foreign governments to interfere in our elections?
Totally up for talking to you guys.
Is that an acceptable thing to have happen?
Congressman,
it's a simple yes or no question.
It's just the best way to do these is it okay? Things is we talk to our press secretary.
There you go.
By the way, that was it. That was that sound. That very end, you hear the bump of the camera, and then there you go. By the way, his aide is trying to answer the question for the activist, saying we're more than happy to connect you to him. We're more than happy to have a civilized version of this conversation that Jerry Springer would approve of. But following him down a hallway with a camera rolling, yelling stuff at him is not the appropriate way to have this conversation. More people need to headbutt cameras. And he didn't do it aggressively. No one's injured. Anyone that gets out there and says he could have hurt somebody, he barely hit it, and it was just the camera. But to me, that's the hilarious response we need in these kind of situations. Just follow Representative Don Young's example. Headbutt stuff lightly when you have a problem with it. Craig Collins in for Chad Benson. We got a whole lot more show coming up in just a few minutes.
The Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins. I'm filling in today, and I want to talk impeachment probably throughout the entire show, but the world gave me a gift last night. I don't have to tell you my opinions of impeachment because Anderson Cooper chose to interview Steve Bannon. I don't know. This is the exact opposite of something I was talking about in the last half hour where a producer made a bad decision. This is genius. This is a wonderful decision to put these two guys on microphones together and have them debate something like this. And I will warn you, I have 3 clips. I don't know if I'll play them all. The conversation gets messy often as they disagree with each other. But I think Anderson Cooper tried to start out by simply asking what a lot of people will ask to make points. This is the setup to what is inevitably either a soundbite that they would capture from someone that is a Trump supporter. The question is essentially, is it wrong for a president, not specifically Trump and not specifically Ukraine, but is it wrong for a president to withhold aid and ask for a favor? And you'll hear Anderson give it in just a second, but that's the setup question, and it immediately starts conflict. Take it away, Anderson.
You've seen a select curated group of witnesses, and you haven't seen the transcripts who don't know what they said.
Well, we've seen the transcript
of their opening statements.
No, we've seen the transcript of the president's phone call, and it says the favor for us, the favor is servers and another one,
we're going to get to see in this process. You're going to get to see all the information. Be laid out.
Let me tell you honestly what I believe. I think you are an incredibly smart guy. I think you believe. Well, no, I'm not saying that as and I respect your positions, but I think You believe you got to circle the wagons. Just like after the Access Hollywood tape, you're either with us or against us.
You're so
no,
cynical.
I'm not. I think you got to
cynical.
But
it's not. No, because here's the thing.
I think you're willing to overlook. You know what? So he lies. So he's doing this. He's doing good things in your mind, and you support him.
Anderson.
Why can't people argue that? That I understand.
Anderson. But I am arguing the fact that I don't think.
Okay, so that's actually them debating whether or not Trump asked for any favors. But it's to me hilarious to hear the way they go back and forth with each other. And it's nice to hear Anderson Cooper say that he thinks Steve Bannon is a smart guy, because it does sound like a debate you have with a friend. Maybe you've had a few drinks and you start yelling at each other about something that you totally disagree on, like where Tom Brady should play next year. And at some point you usually try to tell your friend, like, look, I know you're a smart guy, but he's not going to play for the Chicago Bears. There's no chance that Tom Brady ends his career in Chicago. And so that's just what these two guys sound like as they go after each other for almost anything they try to have a conversation about. I know it's going to be more impeachment stuff, but let's hear another clip.
And China, we have the facts. Okay. You know that the private equity firm of what your son was not an expert in got funded around the time of 2013.
I'm not defending
You are defending.
No, I think a kid being on a board, I think it's shady. I think it makes no sense.
It's shady. It's corrupt.
Well, I don't think there's no evidence Joe Biden benefited in any way. I'm not.
No, his son. This is where his son's criticism is.
If you can give me evidence, give evidence. But there's nobody's given evidence.
Have you read Secret Empires? Have you?
I have not. No, I have not.
Well, we ought to sit down and talk about it. I would love to come back and start giving you the evidence.
You do not.
I like, too, that Bannon's going to start hitting it. I know in our third clip he does it again. He's like, I'd love to come back. Like, we got to have another conversation. Let's do this regularly. And I wonder who tuned in last night to see this, because it's two very differently opinionated people. And at times I give Anderson Cooper credit for being capable of some reason where other people on the station he's on don't seem to be capable of any reason. But to hear him and Steve Bannon argue, I actually have a story that I want to talk about as well. It's a brand new TV show on the Discovery Channel that's called Man vs. Bear. And I will explain it to you, but watching these clips, I kind of thought this would be like a great lead up. Like maybe have Anderson Cooper and Steve Bannon get in a ring and duke it out. And then after that, have Man vs. Bear debut on the Discovery Channel. But let's hear the third clip. I'm enjoying them.
No, I'm not asking about Trump. I'm just saying, is it okay for a president of the United States to ask a foreign president to investigate a political rival?
There's no evidence at all that there's a quid pro quo here.
Okay, I'm not saying.
And if there was a quid pro quo,
so you won't answer just a hypothetical of is it okay for a president, any president, to ask a foreign president to investigate a political rival?
Andy McCarthy and other constitutional scholars are coming out now and saying this whole concept of not even having not making your foreign aid or your military assistance contingent upon some acts.
I just don't understand why Republicans will not ever answer that question that I just asked you. Like, okay, any president asking another president, investigate my rival, and I'll give you aid. Is that okay?
It's not rival. He's a constitutional officer at the time. That's what they're investigating.
So that's okay.
American.
So you have no problem.
No, American involvement and corruption in either China,
Phil,
Ukraine, or anywhere.
We could stop. It's just going to keep going. To me, it's very, very entertaining. And Anderson Cooper maybe kind of has a point, but the setup question is a got you. Is it wrong for any president to withhold aid in order to gain a favor? That is not exactly what some people believe happened on that call between President Trump and the president of Ukraine. That's not what a lot of people agree on took place. But more importantly, in today's gotcha era, where one little soundbite can be all that we hear from an interview, most of us don't watch or listen or enjoy the argument that is that whole interview. If he had said yes, that runs on CNN for, a week. Is that what former chief strategist Steve Bannon says Trump committed crime? That's what their headline would be, and it would run forever. But all right, let's change topics, and let's talk about this Man versus Bear thing. When I saw the headline for this, I thought what I think a lot of people would, that they were somehow going to let a man fight a bear, which is not, that would be very quick, very interesting television. But in reality, I guess it's going to be like skills challenges. And I thought a couple things were kind of amusing about this. And I don't watch Discovery very often, but I probably will watch to see this. The three grizzly bears have names. I wish their names were more intimidating. They're named Bart, Honeybump, and Tank, and they will do skills challenges that bears are used to doing, like rolling a giant log. These test their strength, speed, and stamina, and all the challenges men and women will try to beat them in these skills. There also will be a tug of war that'll somehow take place where you train, I don't know, Honey Bump. Is that the one that would try to do the tug of war? And they would go one way and the guys or one guy would try to beat them. I mean, that's television in 2019. That is the epitome of the ideas we're coming up with now. Just put a man and a bear on TV and have them compete in a skills challenge and see who wins. All right, before I take a break, I do want to tell you one other thing that I found fascinating today, looking through different stuff. It is an article online talking about something that's very, very popular in California right now, and I think going to probably be popular in a lot more places. They're like little pod living. One of the companies is called PodShare that does this, but essentially people live in little tiny areas that are communal, so there's a whole bunch of people in essentially a bunk bed. And I read through this whole article and I was fascinated by it. So if you were to rent a pod in a PodShare living situation, they actually contain a bed, which can be bunked so you have a neighbor below you, linens, one electrical outlet, a small Netflix-loaded HD TV, a built-in shelving unit that I guess you can store all of your things in, one clothing hook, and a dry erase board. Those are the things that come with your pod. Atop the hospital corner bed, there's going to be a kit that consists of one rolled-up hand towel, 2 energy drinks, which are donated by a little-known company that they hope they're getting off the map with these PodShare things, and a pamphlet that tells you the rules of living in a pod world. I don't know, living in a PodShare thing. A pod, I guess, is what I should call it. The quiet hours are just 10 p.m. to 10 a.m. So if you're the kind of person that works early in the morning, you probably hate this place. You're not going to get to bed on time, and you're going to be waking up at a time when everyone's going to be super mad that you're making a bunch of noise. There is no privacy. It's actually against the rules to do things like build a tent, a fort, or put up a clothesline to give yourself some amount of privacy. And then if you have friends visit you, they can only come to the lobby area and hang out for 20 minutes max. If you want them to stay for any longer in the pod sharing commune or whatever you want to call it, they actually have to drop a $15 day pass rate and pay for their ability to visit you for the rest of the day. There's a couple people quoted in this article who live in these kind of situations that said that they like them, and I couldn't believe this. One of the quotes is, "I didn't like living in small apartments, so you move to a pod." And the decent newer building that doesn't have asbestos or anything, negative is nice, and obviously the price is a lot better, he's saying, but he doesn't mind living in a community with a bunch of other people. He's 5 blocks from the beach. And I'm quoting him now, "There's a concert on site every 2 weeks by very talented acts. It has 2 full-sized kitchens. Oh, hooray." And so on and so on. There's a lot of positives. Another person is quoted as saying that she thinks it's like a dream living situation, living next to the beach. If you want to be by yourself, you can. People respect it and don't talk to you when you're begging them for privacy. I'm paraphrasing some of what she's saying. But if you're bored, just ask people if they want to hang out, and you can go sightseeing with all your new buddies in the pod world. There is one other point I want to mention about it, and this was the most interesting thing to me. If you'd like to get intimate, if you have a significant other and you're thinking, hey, how is that going to work? Well, I'm sharing a space that I cannot make private. Well, they do allow you to rent an additional, and I quote, semi-private double room where you can get a little bit more privacy, but it's not fully private. So if you live in a pod world, even if you want to have a significant other over and, do what adults do, you still can't gain privacy. It is the most surreal. I can't imagine people that choose to live in these environments. But obviously it's targeting a lot of college kids who are used to dorm life, that want to save money in places like California, which it is ridiculously expensive to live anywhere in California. So I get that. But I think that maybe this is a step too far. Maybe allow the curtain. Here, if I have one idea, one rule that I would change for the people living in the pod shares is maybe allow them to put up just a little bit of privacy curtain, just something, or maybe just have a blanket that they can put over themselves and sit under, and no one can pull the blanket off of them. Maybe that's the extent of the rule here. And I don't understand why they can't have privacy. What do they think's going to be happening behind the curtain if one guy... Well, actually, you know what? I think I should take a break before I try to answer questions like that. This is Craig Collins filling in for Chad Benson. Got a whole lot more show left, and Chad will be back on Monday.
Experiencing separation anxiety? That's dumb. Check out Chad 24/7 at his website, ChadBensonShow.com, and on iTunes, free. The Chad Benson Show. Never feel lonely again.
This is the Chad Benson Show. My name is Craig Collins. I'll be filling in today. Chad is back on Monday. I'm going to do this. My producer just pointed out that CNN is always breaking news, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no matter when it's happening. That news that you see on the bottom ticker, it, of course, is breaking brand new news. So I'm going to bring you this news right now that I have in my hand as breaking CNN news. Do you want to feel old? I don't want to make you feel old, but I have to break the news, so CNN is okay with me. The Happy Meal is turning 40. The McDonald's Happy Meal is 40 years old. In celebration of the 40th year of Happy Meals for kids at one McDonald's, they will be giving out retro toys. But seriously, all I took away from this entire article was the headline that the Happy Meal is 40. I don't know how I feel about that sort of situation other than I need it to stop happening. Some of the toys will include Power Rangers, the Hamburglar and Grimace. Space Jam toys will be coming out for anyone that remembers that Michael Jordan movie from years ago. Beanie Babies will be some of the other things. A Tamagotchi, a Furby. This is a great troll job in 2019 to make me feel like an ancient human, McDonald's. So thank you for that. Real quick, too, I saw this story, and I don't want to ever be this kind of person. I don't think that, the amount of candy that you have on Halloween is a healthy amount of candy. But I would never want to be like this dentist who literally purchased candy from the kids that came to his house trick-or-treating. He offered them $1 for a pound, and then he gave them, toothbrush. He gave them toothpaste. He gave them all the things you think a dentist would give them. But he bought candy, and he actually did a cool thing with the candy he purchased because, of course, he's not going to consume it. He sent it off to the troops. But how sad is that as a kid? If you're walking up to this guy's house and maybe he's been doing this for years, so you know what to expect. You're like, uh-oh, we're going to deal with Dentist Bob now. And he's standing there with his dollar bills for a pound of candy? That actually doesn't seem like an appropriate price. I think that he probably should have paid a lot more. Did he go shopping for it? Did he see how much it cost to buy like a 200-piece bag at Walmart? These kids have to make a little bit more money than this for their time and effort. But yeah, a dentist in Ohio decided that it's message time on Halloween, and I need to get these kids healthier and happier, and then at least I'm going to send stuff off to the troops. So that is a nice part in it. But my suggestion next year, just send candy to the troops and leave the rest of the preaching at home. One last question for you before I take a break here in a couple minutes. But do you think your significant other has selective hearing? Have they admitted to it before? Is it a situation where maybe every so often you ask them to do something, and if they're not, in the right frame of mind, they just didn't hear you, air quotes? Well, apparently a whole lot of people believe that is the case. 7 out of 10 people said yes, their significant other definitely has selective hearing, because isn't that always the case? The time when they don't hear you, the time when you really need a favor or something important to get done is the time when they were just too distracted to focus in on what you were saying. If it's something much simpler, something much easier, then no big deal at all. They hear you 100% of the time. But if it's doing chores or stuff that you want me to do that I'm too lazy to do, then I just, I don't know how I missed it, honey. I can't believe that I didn't hear you. Men don't hear something their partner says at least once a day, according to this study, for a total of 388 times a year. Apparently, it's a little more than once a day. And women don't hear things pretty much every day as well, with a total of 339 times a year. And what's most interesting about this survey, if you think about it, if you were asked this question, you immediately think of examples in your mind. So the things that they're asking for are probably the ones they best remember. I imagine there's a whole bunch of other moments of selective hearing beyond just a 388 and 339 a year. But those are the ones that people in the survey said, no, of course. I remember he still hasn't done that. He needs to get back home and do it now. We are willing to give our partners the benefit of the doubt, apparently, in the survey, and not accuse them of doing it purposefully. A lot of people seem to believe that it is accidental. I'm not sure that I'm one of those people. And okay, if I'm being honest, and I hope my wife's not listening, I heard you sometimes, honey. I did. I heard you, and I I pretended I didn't, and I'm telling you now on the air because I feel like I have to, because I feel like the survey is making me. But yeah, no, okay. I know that I was supposed to do that thing, and I just didn't want to do it. So I didn't hear you for a couple days. I have a little bit more time, so I'm actually also going to mention this because I found it fascinating. Golf.com released the most unexpected trivia that I've seen in a while. They did this also with a survey, which apparently they had 52 PGA Tour players respond to, and they asked them one very simple question. Have you ever, on a golf course? Is that something you've done? 41% of players said that they did. That means 21 of 52 people have done that on a golf course. I don't know if it's just because you're a professional and you're like, this is a thing. I want to be able to at least one time with the missus, do this, be intimate in this place because I love golf so much and I love the sport and I love her and now they're colliding. But does that number shock you? And these are professionals. I don't know about my friends now. Now I'm curious about my buddies who love golf. What is actually going on? It doesn't have to take you 4 hours to play 18 holes, man. Something else happened. All right, a lot more Chad Benson Show filling in. Craig Collins with you today. Chad is back on Monday. These golf people are disgusting.
This is the Chad Benson Show. Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. Craig Collins filling in today. Chad will be back on Monday. I have just a little more time with you, and I wanted to reach out to a guy that I actually have a bet. Every time I walk into a gym with my wife, I go, Vince Colonnese, he's probably going to be on one of the TVs because 50% of the time he's on one of the TVs. He is a host at WMAL's Mornings on the Mall. He is also the editorial director of the Daily Caller. Welcome to the show, Vince. Thanks for being with us.
Craig, thank you so much. I love doing this. Thank you.
Well, and I'm thrilled that you helped me win that bet more often than not because you're on one of the televisions being a political commentator somewhere, and I'm up I think $10 on my wife. So let's go ahead.
Yeah, actually, in fact, tonight you can catch me at 11 o'clock. I'll be on Shannon Bream's show on the Fox News channel.
See, exactly correct. All right, but you told me now I feel like I'm cheating. Now this is not. I don't know if I can make a bet today. But anyway, let's kick things off. Guess what the first topic we're going to talk about today is, Vince? Can you guess, out of everything out there, what would lead most conversations today?
I suspect it starts with an I.
It does. Impeachment. I'm pretty sure, half of the country is saving the world from something terrible, and the other half of the country is making up something absurd. Explain to me your take on this whole ridiculous impeachment, the latest one, by the way, because this is like round 6 of us doing this kind of thing.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you think about it. Let's just blow the lens out for a second and think about this in perspective. George W. Bush takes us to war in Iraq. A lot of people die. It's based on a pretext that there's chemical weapons. There are weapons of mass destruction. It turns out there isn't any. And Nancy Pelosi never sought his impeachment. Then we get Barack Obama and his presidency, and we get a range of scandals, including where Americans die. We get places things like Operation Fast and Furious, a Border Patrol agent killed with weapons that we allowed to go into other countries untraced. And then, of course, we have Benghazi. Then, of course, we have American citizens being killed in drone strikes. The president keeps a kill list in his office. It's called the Threat Disposition Matrix. Mm-hmm. And we never tried to impeach him. I mean, as crazy as things got, Republicans never attempted to impeach Barack Obama. Yet here we are, where you have a phone call where this president talks to the Ukrainian president and says, hey, I'd like you to confront corruption in your country. And then the subject of Joe Biden comes up, and all of Washington goes crazy. It's almost as if the only thing that's impeachable is when the corruption of Washington is in danger of being exposed.
There you go. That's a smart take on it for sure. You make a great point, though. No one died during that phone call. I'm pretty sure no one was killed because of the phone call between the president and, the president of Ukraine. And yet that is, by the way, we'll talk about this in a second, but they are also very upset with Trump for photoshopping a photo with a hero dog. So that's the day and age in which we live. And I actually said this earlier in the show, Vince, that I know that some Republicans are talking about the likely bias of whistleblowers and the likely, motivations behind a lot of these things. And my opinion is that you're incapable of having no opinion of that man because of who he is and how he operates. The people who love him, and they only love him more in spite of all this. And the people who hate him. But I've never met a single person who doesn't have some opinion of him because that's who he is. So even though all that is in play in this situation, it really was inevitable that anything this man does, half of the country and certainly the politicians in Washington will call it the biggest and the worst thing he's ever done, the worst thing anyone's ever done, right?
Yeah, well, in fact, you think about in World Series Game 7, the Trump campaign ran their first television ad, and at the end of the ad, there was this incredible line, and I don't want to misquote it. I know I'm in proximity to it. But they said something to the effect of, he's no Mr. Nice Guy, but sometimes Washington needs a Donald Trump. And I think it kind of perfectly encapsulates the whole reason people voted for him back in 2016. And is this, not only did they like that he would advance some of their policy positions, but more importantly for a lot of Trump voters, he was going to stop everyone else's positions. He was going to stop people like Hillary Clinton, of course, from advancing, threats to religious liberty, things like that. And specifically, the fact that Washington hates Donald Trump was a reason that people voted for Donald Trump. They didn't vote for him to be their preacher. They voted for him to be the bouncer. They wanted this guy to come in and kind of shake things up. So when you see Washington getting ticked off at Trump yet again, for some people, that's ratifying their judgment. Oh, that's just telling them, hey, I made the right choice. D.C. hates this guy. You saw the World Series. They booed at him when he attended the Nationals game. I think that was game 5. Yeah, game 5.
Oh, game 5. You're right, 5.
But the point is, he shows up, they go crazy, and that the message to the rest of the country is, the rich people who can afford to attend the World Series in D.C. do not like Trump. Big whoop.
Yeah, it's fascinating you say it that way, actually, because this is my opinion, and I know that maybe trying to explain his actions in the most rational of ways that I can do it is not fair. You can judge him for his actions as they are, but I care about intent. I care about the reasons why things are said a certain way, and sometimes I believe that the president is just a more casual guy than any of the people out there who've been in political offices like his. So he says things differently than even he intends them to sound. But on that phone call, when he's asking to investigate Biden and investigate corruption in the the Ukraine, as you say, what's interesting to me is the idea that I don't think President Trump would need this to beat Biden. And I don't think he would need something like this or some sort of crazy scandal to beat a Joe Biden. So I don't believe for a second that he actually intended to ask for any sort of, information on his biggest political rival because he had any level of fear of Joe Biden. And I think that's important to say because then you can hear much more easily that he intends to go after corruption before giving any sort of aid to a different country. And he just so happens to know a couple examples. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, I think you're onto it. And look, you can have beef with the propriety of the president bringing up a political opponent in any capacity. That's totally fine.
Right.
But the idea that this rises to the level of high crimes and misdemeanors is preposterous on its face. And think about what he's asking for. He's asking for a factual accounting of something that had occurred in the past, in 2016. So rather than what we encountered by way of what we often refer to as the Steele dossier, right? That was that Hillary Clinton paid-for document that was assembled by a foreign national from the UK, who literally relied on Russian sources to manufacture slander against Donald Trump, at that point, the citizen, in order to hurt him. That is a very different thing. When you're seeking out from other countries fake information rather than an authentic accounting of what really happened. I hold to this day that if Donald Trump had actually colluded with Russia, which seems insane because he can barely collude with his own administration, but if he actually had colluded with Russia, by asking for what did Hillary Clinton do to raise money from your country in the Clinton Foundation?
Mm-hmm.
If you got answers on that from the Russians, I would not object, because that sounds like facts. That doesn't sound like nonsense that's literally manufactured to hurt someone.
Right. And by the way, you did say something that's a trigger word or a trigger phrase to half the people that have an opinion on this kind of thing, crimes and high crimes and misdemeanors, because apparently people seem to believe, and it is true, that the impeachment process in and of itself is a political process and not a legal process. But people seem to want to debate now whether or not you have to commit a crime to be impeached, which is to me insane that we have to debate whether or not what he did is a crime or not, because apparently some people think you should be impeached even if you don't commit crimes.
The fact that it doesn't rise to anywhere near the level of being serious is huge. And here's one more reason why. This would be one thing if it was early in an administration. We have many years left. We really got to take care of this. And by the way, the sin still is small. But we are within spitting distance of the 2020 election. And what we're debating right now is whether Congress is going to stop the electorate from having a say about Donald Trump's future. And they're going to literally just remove the guy from office on their own.
Mm-hmm.
That's the position we're in. And we are now a year and a week, not even, it's less than that, away from the next election. The American people can do this on their own. And this is D.C.'s patronizing posture towards the American public, which is it doesn't trust the public to do it. But the public can do whatever they want, and they should, because they're the ones who ultimately hold the power.
Well, and obviously when this fails, when he is not impeached, when the Senate certainly doesn't, if the House does anything, the Senate certainly won't do anything about it. I imagine the next big, giant controversy will be to impeach Trump over the dog photo, right? We got to get Trump out of the office because he photoshopped a dog photo. Tell us what happened there.
This hero dog, I love this story because you get this dog that obviously chases Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi down, and Baghdadi freaks because the dog is approaching. He ends up detonating his vest as the head of ISIS and killing not only himself but 2 children. We heard 3 originally, but it is 2, according to the Pentagon, who were standing next to him, his own kids. So that vile human being reached his end because a great American dog chased him down. So cool. Now, this dog will be visiting the White House, and we saw the president just kind of, because he was amused by it, tweeted a photoshopped photo that somebody had made on the internet of him placing a Medal of Honor around the dog's neck. It is so transparently photoshopped for any number of reasons, including the dog never went to the White House. So obvious. But the American news media, a range of reporters, including at places like the New York Times and CNN, decided they needed to fact-check the photo to establish whether the dog had ever actually gone. They began to try and attack the president for daring to tweet a photo like that. This is deranged, Greg.
Mm-hmm. Did they go for other dog witnesses to see if they had been around the dog at the same time and knew where he was? That's great. I hope that CNN had breaking news coverage of the dogs in this hero dog's world and what they know of whether or not he's ever met the president. That sounds like an incredible right.
In fact, I saw somebody say it's so great that CNN chased this down and determined that the dog was sniffing butts in high school.
Well, that's a high crime and misdemeanor, in my opinion.
That's right.
Real quick, before I let you go, I want to ask you one other thing. I usually like to chat with you and ask you one thing outside of the world of politics. I don't know, are you a Harry Potter fan at all by chance?
I don't know if you're supposed to admit that. If you are, you're supposed to keep that to yourself.
I think you can admit it.
I read those books.
Okay, there you go. See, okay, I got you. This is a got you conversation now, Vince. This was all a trick to make you say that on the air. That soundbite will be everywhere. But actually, Toyota rolled out a brand new electric-powered broom that Harry Potter fans are excited about because it kind of looks like you're getting closer and closer to being a real-life Harry Potter human. I just want to know, are you excited about the new Toyota broom that you can, by the way, in order to use it, you do have to put on rollerblades for it to drag you around with its wheeled, machine, whatever. But I just assume you're going to have one of these in the Colonnese household very, very soon.
Yeah, no, that's not happening. And here's why. Because every time I hear a story that's like what you just told, it accelerates the shame that I have for ever cracking the spine on that book.
Well, I don't know. I mean, in today's day and age, you can certainly monetize anything. So Toyota's hoping to sell out on these electric brooms. Thank you, Vince Colonnese, for joining us today. Good luck out there in D.C. I know it's probably a fun time. By the way, did you celebrate the World Series win at all? Are you a fan?
Yeah, we were so pumped about it. In fact, yeah, it was so cool to see the Nationals win the World Series. And tomorrow, actually, right in the middle of D.C., they're going to have the big parade tomorrow early afternoon. It'll be great.
There you go. Take your broom. I think it'll be a fun time, Vince. You are the editorial director of the Daily Caller, and you are a host of WMAL's Mornings on the Mall. We look forward to talking again soon. More Chad Benson Show with me, Craig Collins, next.
I, you, he, she, it. Lucy is a girl.
Point of personal privilege, please do not use gendered language to address everyone.
Shut up, fool. Ain't nobody got time for this.
This is the Chad Benson Show.
Man, that's the first time I've heard that intro. I love the point of privilege guy being in there. This is the Chad Benson Show. I'm Craig Collins filling in for the day. That guy, he can interrupt the show anytime he wants with a point of privilege. Please, point of privilege. Anyway, there's a cool study that I saw. I mean, I guess cool, depending on your thoughts on marijuana. If you're a person who is a fan, a person who is a defender of the rights to smoke said pot, marijuana, cannabis, whatever you want to call it, you have a new way in which to promote your product and say that it does good things. This is a study that proved a interesting tie between people who are heavy drinkers and people who are pot users and people who do both. If you're a heavy drinker, the odds of you in your life at some point developing a liver problem are about 90%. And I mean truly the highest of binge drinker type of person. But apparently in this study, if you are someone who moderately also uses cannabis, that percentage of liver problems drops from 90% to 8%. From 90% to an 8% chance of having an issue. And if you're someone who is a heavy user of both products, this is someone who does it quite a few times a day, kind of recreationally, those people have a 1.4% chance of developing a liver problem due to their excessive alcohol drinking because somehow, and researchers I don't think really understand how, but the two things tied together prevent you from having that sort of ailment. It's a surreal thing that I saw today, kind of a highlight headline that's going to be all over the place. But next time you get in an argument with your pot buddy, he's going to tell you, but you know what, man? If you drink too much, you should definitely smoke pot. It should be legal everywhere. So that's a new one out there. Before we take a break, I want to talk a little bit about Matt Castle. If you don't know who Matt Castle is, he's a quarterback that used to play for the Patriots, and he recently talked about what it was like to play for Bill Belichick, one of the greatest coaches in NFL history. And I thought it was interesting because I wonder if you have a boss kind of like Bill. Because what Matt said is most times when we envision the sports coach, we think about those big motivational speeches you see in movies, those rah-rah, we can do it, now's the time kind of things. You know, everyone's down, dejected in the locker room, maybe after you've had a rough half, and the thing he does is he pushes you right back into that, we know we're going to win attitude. That is not Bill Belichick. He's the kind of guy that I guess in a pregame, rah-rah conversation will actually just go through and outline exactly what you need to do, exactly what every player, every part of the team needs to do to win. He said, and this is Matt Castle now talking about him, he doesn't come in every week and go, guys, this game defines us sort of thing. His main focus is speaking to the team in the realities of what they need to accomplish, offensively, defensively, special teams. We'd go through every unit and specifically point out the week's keys, whether it was taking on the rush, whatever it is, he's pointing them out piece by piece. And then the most interesting thing Matt said is that after a game, even if they win, he says, enjoy it for now, but we'll be back to work on Tuesday. And then you come in, and even if you won by 70 points, he's going to have corrections for every part of the team, every thing that he can point out. He will say, this is how we can get better and better and better. Man, when Tom Brady says he needs a couple more attaboys from Bill Belichick, I'm kind of seeing how that makes sense. But at the same time, maybe a boss like this would work for you. I don't know. But I feel bad for Matt Castle now and still a little impressed with Bill. Craig Collins in for Chad. We got a lot more show coming up in just a few minutes. Yes, we're talking impeachment, but we're talking a lot more than that because it's a Friday. Why do we have to talk about just one thing all day? All right, more Chad Benson Show next.
The Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
This is the Chad Benson Show. I am your host for the day, Craig Collins. Chad is back on Monday. Of course, impeachment is the topic of the day. It's the topic probably for the next few days, few weeks. I apologize, people. I did want to mention this, though. A recent survey demonstrated that the average American's opinion really isn't changing, no matter what happens. Even after yesterday's formalizing of procedures for the impeachment inquiry, which is a thing that they maybe did or didn't have to do, although I don't really care. I mean, some people are saying they didn't have to. It doesn't matter. Anyway, 49% of Americans indicate that Trump should be impeached and removed from office, while 47% indicate that he should not be impeached. And that is very, very similar to the numbers we've been seeing for months now. So even as this trial, this whatever you want to call it, this impeachment process blazes into high gear, and Nancy Pelosi goes on Stephen Colbert to celebrate and gets asked questions like, how are you finally going to take down the monster, which I assume was what Stephen was asking. That's some version of that question. The American people seem to not really care at all. By the way, among Democrats and Republicans, the numbers continue to hold incredibly similar. 82% of Democrats support removing the president, while 13% are against it. 18% of Republicans support removing the president, while 82% oppose it. And just like our guest last half hour, Vince Colonnese, said, why not leave this up to the American people? We just so happen to be in a time period in which, people are running for re-election. It's only going to take a little bit longer, Democrats, to wait for the American people to decide. Why not let that happen? By the way, in this survey, it did mention that 55% of people, no matter what your political leaning, did think that the call to the Ukraine something a little weird might have happened, with 60% saying it was inappropriate for Trump to involve Rudy Giuliani in any of this stuff. And I agree with that part, mostly because Rudy Giuliani seems to be a shell of the man he used to be. I don't think he was the most competent of choices for any of that stuff. So my opinion is that maybe Rudy should slowly disappear. I don't mean in a bad way. I just mean maybe it's time to retire, bud. By the way, Trump was also trolled, of course, for deciding to move to Florida. President Trump recently stated that he is going to be changing his main address. His declaration for domicile will be changing to Palm Beach, and people were upset. People were very upset. People are saying that he's dodging trying to show his taxes to people in New York, and so he can't even move. He can't live. He is a very rich New Yorker who is moving to Florida. Is that breaking news? Is that a thing that is not common for a whole bunch of people just like him? Yes, he happens to be the president. Yes, you happen to have a really strong opinion of him. But at the end of the day, he's also a rich businessman that's born and raised in New York and is moving to Florida. I don't know. On its face, if I just didn't say his name, that's a nothing burger of a story. People were tweeting, though. They were very, very upset with him, and the president did tweet as well, saying he hated having to make this decision because he does cherish his hometown. But, and I quote, despite the fact that I pay millions of dollars in city, state, and local taxes each year, I have been treated very badly by the political leaders of both the city and the state. So Donald Trump feels that it's time to get up and move. And I want to point this out in a completely different thing. This thing, it's just as valuable to me to think of it this way, but this is a rich person that is trying to move to avoid taxes, which brings me to Elizabeth Warren and her recently announced deal to ramp up her Medicaid for all. She's actually put out there the steps she will take to raise that $52 trillion she will need to fund this. And guess what? A majority of her plan involves raising taxes and charging rich people more money. And I just want to let her know, and maybe a lot of people know, that companies and the extremely wealthy have the means to move and live somewhere else. They have the means to pick up and leave. So if your plan is to ask for, 20, 30, 40, 50% of their money, which it's not yet, but certainly, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the representative out of New York, has made a reference to the fact that long, long ago, the rates were that high in some of the ultra rich. That, if we keep going down this road, maybe a reason some people fear it, some rational people fear these kind of decisions so much, is because those guys can leave. Donald Trump is leaving New York, and if you tax too much money to people that are ultra rich, they don't have to stay and be here. It's the greatest country on earth, and there's a reason why. And if you go crazy about it, you might not work out. By the way, Elizabeth Warren is now the leading candidate in Iowa. She, in the most recent poll, is up to 22% of potential voters. Sanders is at 19, Buttigieg at 18, and Biden all the way down at 17% now, which goes back to my other point that I've made a few times today. Do you really think Donald Trump made that phone call to the Ukraine because he was afraid of Biden? Do you think he was afraid to run against Joe Biden? I don't think he was. And if he's not afraid, then why risk it? Then for what reason do you do something like that? For what reason do you try to gain information on a political rival if you actually don't see them as a real threat? And I just don't think he does. Switching gears because it's Friday and I like to talk about a lot more than just what Washington tells me to talk about. 61% of people have no plans to go Black Friday shopping this year. 61% of people will do that all from the comfort of their own home. They're not going out. They're not shopping. And so apparently companies are already rolling out their Black Friday sales. Kohl's is in the news today for throwing out a list of its Black Friday deals and saying they're already available in stores. That's right. It is the 1st of November. We used to complain years ago about Black Friday encroaching on Thanksgiving. So Kohl's fixed that. We're just going to roll these deals out now. You know, you can rush the store today. And one reason why, which I thought was pretty funny in this article I read, apparently, and I didn't know this was true, and I don't know how it makes much of a difference, but this year there are the fewest possible days between Thanksgiving and Christmas because of where Thanksgiving falls on the calendar. Apparently, there are only 26 days from when we would celebrate with family for Thanksgiving and when we'd need a crap ton of presents for people. So stores might be anxious that we just don't have enough time. I don't know if they assume that everyone's like my brother. Everyone's the guy that's shopping Christmas Eve for everyone, and you find out what you got from him because you realize it's one of the only things probably left the place he went. But yeah, for whatever reason, there's 26 days from now until, or from Thanksgiving until Christmas, so stores are getting antsy. Are you someone who's going to shop on Black Friday? Are you someone who's going to go out and buy things, or do you like the fact that you can buy it all on the internet now? We have the technology, people. It's available to us, so it shouldn't be shocking that it's happening this way. And I just think it's crazy to be. Sometimes businesses worry way too much. They invent problems in their minds. They're like, you know what? No, 26 days, that's not enough time. 27, we'd be fine. We would not have to do this if it was 27 days. But now that it's only 26, abandon ship, do everything we can to make these sales immediately. In other different news, not necessarily CNN breaking news, but my news of the day, there is going to be a mystery flavored candy cane. What is it about the mystery flavor? I don't know if you know this, but Mountain Dew had a mystery flavor in time for Halloween. It was called Voodoo. And just the other day, they let us know that it was a candy corn flavor. And now apparently we're going to have mystery flavored candy canes because what society needs is to guess what they're eating. We need to figure out, like, what is that? And the internet will probably love this. The internet will debate the flavor, and maybe it's an intelligent gimmick sales-wise, but I just think it's funny that the mystery flavor thing is the best we can do now. That's our go-to move to get buzz for our companies now, is to let's just put out a flavor and not tell anybody what that is. That might be great. That might be a really good move. You know, we got no other ideas left. We don't know how to get more people to buy candy canes, so let's just not tell them stuff. Maybe we don't even sell candy canes anymore. Maybe we go real rogue and just sell mystery things in the box. Yep, that is where we're at right now. This is 2019. I'm Craig Collins filling in for Chad Benson. We've got a lot more to talk about on the show today. I guess maybe we can do a little bit more political stuff before we get out of here, but I really don't want to. It's Friday. Come on. Why would we need to do that? All right, I've got more stuff coming up for you in just a minute. Craig Collins filling in for Chad. He's back Monday. But first, we take a break.
Set Chad straight. Text the show, 323-538-2423. That's 323-538-CHAD. Someone has to do it. Might as well be you. The Chad Benson Show.
This is the Chad Benson Show, filling in for just, the day-to-day. I'm Craig Collins. Chad is back on Monday. We have a lot more to get to. We're certainly talking impeachment as much as we can today. And Allison Camerata, of course, was talking impeachment when she talked to what is, quote, in the article, Trump defender Matt Schlapp. Let's hear a little bit of that conversation.
If they don't come forward with articles that show any criminality, but just like your polling,
Matt,
that you
it doesn't
guys
have
have
to be
done.
a crime. That's
Anna got to talk for 2 straight minutes, Allison.
But you need to not be misleading.
Talk.
You know that a crime is not the standard,
asymmetrical. Don't have an asymmetrical standard. You're going to let her talk.
Use misinformation.
I'm not lying. Name one lie. If you think there's a crime, you give me the code right now. Give me the code. What's the crime?
Matt,
don't say that I'm lying.
It doesn't have to be a crime, Matt. You know that.
It has to be a crime or a misdemeanor. It's in the Constitution.
Why don't you just play the video of Lindsey Graham saying over and over?
Lindsey Graham was wrong.
To interpretation.
Lindsey Graham was wrong. He's not one of our founding fathers, Anna. I know he's a great guy and all, but he doesn't get to write the Constitution. The founders and we, the people, wrote the Constitution.
He's chair of Judiciary Committee in the Senate.
This is a silly conversation.
Listen, Matt, I agree with you.
I agree with you. Very silly.
Matt,
we should only impeach a president. Let me just tell you my opinion. You can have yours. My opinion is we shouldn't impeach a president unless there are serious crimes, not even just like a jaywalking crime. I think Bill Clinton, when he committed perjury and he had his Me Too moments, I think those were pretty serious. But even in that situation, the Republicans paid a price because it looked like they were being partisan. If the Democrats look like they're being partisan with the impeachment of Donald Trump, I do believe, as your polling that you've done a good job on explaining this morning, will demonstrate that it will benefit the president.
That's fair.
See, and he is absolutely right about that, by the way. And I don't know how, if you're watching right now, you can't see that there's some sort of bias or some sort of motivation beyond the facts of what they're actually trying to impeach him for. I don't know how anyone would draw a conclusion other than the fact that there's bias involved in the way this is working. But the funniest thing in that audio to me is just the very beginning where Matt tries to start talking and Allison is immediately like, no, Aslan, no, stop it, please, calm down, Aslan. Let me say things a little bit more than 2 seconds. It's just funny. That station is an interesting place to be. All right, let's talk about Katie Hill again real quick because, we kind of have to, I think. There is this whole big thing about the double standard in how Katie Hill is now resigning, and certainly there were photos that were shared. And I said this earlier in the show, and I'll say it again, that I think that, of course, it was wrong that any of those photos exist and were made public, and anything private that she never intended to be consumed by the world got consumed by the world. And in a revenge porn kind of thing or whatever it is, if there's a jilted lover involved who shared this kind of stuff, that's illegal. That shouldn't happen. That is bad. But for us to turn this into a conversation about a double standard and to say that men wouldn't have to deal with this stuff, I think is at least a little bit silly. I can think of some guys that got embroiled in sexual related things and wind up having to walk away from political positions because of them. And by the way, she didn't have to do that. She could have remained in office. She could have attempted to continue to fight this sort of thing from within and not actually walk away. And there are rumors that maybe there was more material out there that she was worried about becoming public. And so that's why, to prevent being a distraction, she walks away. But there was a debate on CNN between one of their contributors, Aisha Moody Mills, and a PBS host who certainly I thought had a pretty good argument back. That's Margaret Hoover. Let's hear that.
But I don't think that there's any wrong with someone doing whatever they want to do in the confines of their home. The problem is that he is the one who has broken the law by sharing those photos. She's not the one who's problematic for having taken them. And I think that this attitude, this is why we have the double standard. Because we're saying, oh, well, she shouldn't have done it. She shouldn't have done it. Well, she was in a loving, committed, married relationship. But it's his criminal act that has publicized all of her dirty laundry.
I just have to push back. This is not a conservative prudishness about taking nude photos. It's an awareness that as a millennial, you have a risk, and you know this, and you've known it since you've been engaging in the internet and since you've been alive, because you're a digital native, that if you have naked photos out there, that is a risk.
Yeah, that is true. And this politician is a younger person. She's been, as they say, for most of her life, part of the digital age. So she would be aware of the risk in allowing anyone to have photographs on a phone or, any kind of storage of material like that. And when you become a person who goes into the political space, those kind of things can haunt you for sure. Do we really think that if there was photographic evidence or video evidence of some of the things that other politicians are accused of doing, similar things to this, including, of course, the president and the people who've come forward to say that they've had relationships with him, do you think if there was video or photo evidence that we wouldn't care about it? In order for it to be a double standard, don't we have to not care? Wouldn't we have to brush past those kind of things and go, That doesn't matter. And as they point out a little bit later on, and CNN analyst John Avlon also mentions, it does change the situation to have photographic and video evidence of what took place. Here's John.
Against revenge porn. Do whatever you're going to do to fight against it.
The fact
don't
that we're
let
not
yourself
talking
be a
about
victim
Duncan
about it.
Hunter right now and
if there were
calling
photos,
on him
if there
to
were tons
resign
of photos of
really
him
makes me sad.
naked, maybe we would.
He's got to go.
Maybe that is the difference. I don't know.
No, I think photos do change the awareness.
Yes, they do. They change the awareness. They change our perception of it, and they certainly change its ability to be a distraction. So when she steps aside, and again, she mentioned the reason why, even though she wants to fight against the things that she believes are unfair about this situation, including what she determines is a double standard, of course the situation gets ramped up, and the amount of media coverage for it, the amount of interest for it changes when there's visual proof out there that shouldn't be out there. I'm not saying that it should exist and should be out there, but I do agree with Margaret that people who are born in the, last 20, 30 years might be more likely to think about that sort of thing before having stuff like that exist and be out there in the world for people to find. Just a few more things before I take a break. I want to talk to you a little bit about the fact that Russia is going to be disconnecting from the internet. Today, this is a story, a headline out there that Russia is poised to disconnect from the internet in theory. So I don't know if that decision or that, the great Russian firewall that's going to be put up to help them, kind of restrict access in the way that other people do will be a good thing, a bad thing. I don't know. But that's just kind of a weird thing to see and read and hear. I don't know how it impacts what we think moving forward of any sort of conversations about Russia's influence in elections on places like Facebook, because if they don't have internet, it's going to be kind of hard for them to influence us on Facebook. But yeah, that's a thing going on. That's how things work in this day and age. One last thing I want to talk about, and this it might not be the correct transition after talking about Katie Hill a few seconds ago, but heck, I thought it was funny. I think it's interesting. I want to mention it. There are a new set of emojis that people recommend you use if you'd like to flirt online. I don't know if you heard, but Facebook has banned some emojis from use in certain situations because they don't want to see them out there. But now there's a new list, a new set of recommended ones that you can use. And I can do this Casey Kasem style before we take a break for a commercial. Here are the top 7 in reverse order, or top 6 actually in reverse order. And I'm not going to explain why they would work for flirting. No one's explaining it to me. But these are the ones people recommend. A plate of falafel is apparently a very flirty new emoji to put out there. A coconut is one that you could use if you're looking for such things. Finger pinching. An oyster. Number 2 on the list is Speedo, which is not sexy at all. I don't think that anyone should do that if they're trying to impress someone. And number 1, a person kneeling. I don't need to explain these things to you. This is how the world works. This is Craig Collins in for Chad Benson. I hope you guys have a great time this weekend. We got to take a break. Have a good time out there. We got a lot more to get to.
This is the Chad Benson Show. Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
Welcome back to the Chad Benson Show. Craig Collins filling in today. Got a lot of stuff to talk about. Of course, first and foremost, impeachment. That's what everyone's going to be talking about today. There's 2 very divided sides, obviously. And I've read, I just saw this today, that America still is sitting in the same place it's sitting in. I don't know if there's an assumption that at some point people are going to have their opinions change. But to me, reading through the tea leaves of all this, the American people have made their decision, and nothing that comes out moving forward will do much to push people one way or the other. And I know that there's still a lot more to come out. A lot of people are saying that, look, we have all this proof now, that it's an easy decision, legally this and that, but there's still a lot more to go here. So anyone that thinks that we're at the finish line, you're utterly wrong. This investigation, the amount of witnesses that will come forward, the amount of conversations that still need to take place before we truly understand what's going on. We're essentially, I think, maybe halfway, maybe less than that. I wanted to open this hour of the show, though, talking about Judge Knapp, who opened his show the other day with some interesting context to this whole thing. In the first of these two clips I want to play, he talks a little bit about the current strategy that Republicans have to try to combat this whole ridiculous impeachment thing. And then he talks about what they actually should be doing. But let's hear the first clip from Judge Knapp.
Where do we stand on the impeachment of the president? A lot of unusual and disjointed events occurred in the past week, and now they seem to be coming together. A group of Republicans in the House of Representatives were unhappy with hearings being held behind closed doors, even though those hearings are perfectly consistent with House rules that were written by the Republicans when they controlled the House, stormed a meeting of the House Intelligence, Foreign Affairs, and Oversight Committees, and occupied the hearing room to the exclusion of the committees and their witness. A very unusual event in the modern era.
So what he's talking about there is the approach that if you attack the process and then you also attack maybe the witnesses themselves and try to paint them as people that are obviously biased, which I'm not saying they're not, by the way. They may very well be biased people. There's a lot of biased people that exist because of who the president is and how he lives his life. The things he says, out there in the world will get very stark reactions. This is a reality TV star. This person was a reality TV star before they wound up becoming the president of the United States. So to have differing opinions of him makes sense. And even the people who will be witnesses against him certainly won't be capable of having no opinion of someone like President Donald Trump. But Republicans attacking the process and the actual witnesses themselves is a mistake, according to Judge Knapp. And I truly agree with that, because there's a much better question that they could try to answer. And I think they're starting. If I've seen a lot of stuff in the last 24 hours, I believe that the messaging is going to start changing, because the real question is this impeachable? And the second clip, Judge Knapp talks a little bit about that.
The question is, does that behavior on the part of the president constitute an impeachable offense? The Republicans' best objective would be to argue that it doesn't.
Why doesn't it? Why is it not an impeachable offense? There's a lot of answers to that question. And Judge goes on to talk a lot about that. I don't want to play his show because I'm supposed to host the radio show. Although I'd love to have him in. If he wants to jump on, I'll give him an hour. I'm filling in for Chad anyway. So Judge Knapp and I can do a buddy show. That sounds amazing. But the real question is what did he do? Why is it coming up now? What did the president do in the call with Ukraine? Why is that conversation so important right now during an election season? And what was the result of it, too, by the way? The president has admitted to essentially all of the facts that you and I would say, okay, those facts don't make you look great. You withheld aid from Ukraine in order to get them to investigate. And I want to say it this way because I think it's clear to make a good point here. Yes, Joe Biden's name was mentioned. Yes, Hunter Biden was mentioned in the phone call. But if you're the president, what you're going to say is you want to eliminate corruption in a place where corruption profoundly exists in the Ukraine. So it's not, if I were defending the president, about investigating someone who just happened to, at the time, to be his main rival in a political season. It's about not wanting to give aid to a country that needs to fix a substantial corruption issue. So that is the conversation. Is it appropriate for a president of the United States to tell a country that we will not help you, we will not aid you militarily or any other way until you find a way to be a less corrupt place? And that, I think, is a conversation we're not having enough of right now. It is incredibly true that Ukraine for years and years and years has struggled with every facet of its government having just profound levels of corruption. And so Donald Trump is the kind of guy, as you've seen during his presidency, that has stark decisions. He makes very bold, very stark decisions. Did it happen to involve a political rival, which may or may not have certain shades of inappropriateness? Sure. Is that an impeachable offense, though? I'm not sure. And by the way, nothing actually happened because of this. The investigation didn't cause Biden to have he's going to lose the Democratic side of that election because he's Joe Biden. That's another thing that I wish people could go in and defend. I wish someone could take the stand and be like, look, guys, what we're talking about right now is a guy that wasn't going to win anyway. Let's really picture this. The debates that would go on between Trump and Biden, if the two of them had gotten to that point. Does he need to have this sort of investigation help cripple the chances of Joe Biden to win an election? No, he doesn't need that. I think that President Trump, as he did in China, as he does everywhere he interacts with anyone at any time, he is one of the most bold, and I'm not sure that it's well planned, but one of the, this is a yes or no thing. We're going to remove troops. We're going to do this. This is how we do things. And so he hops on a call with the Ukraine after a lot of people had already communicated with them that, look, we need things to be different. We need some things to, happen on this call, and you need to understand that. And he pushes for those things. I don't think, and this is my opinion, and actually I have awesome audio to get to later in the day between Cooper and Bannon. Bannon was on Cooper's show, Anderson Cooper, and it was crazy. Those two guys in a room together. I don't usually watch Anderson Cooper, although out of all the people on that station, he's probably the most tolerable. But him and Steve Bannon having just a screaming match debate, to me, was fascinating. And essentially their conversation broke down to that very simple point. What was Trump trying to accomplish in Trump's mind? And I firmly believe that the president wasn't just trying to gain an advantage on Joe Biden. I think he wanted to prevent corruption. I take him at his word, much like Bannon does. And Anderson Cooper, of course, does not. But it's very interesting to see that all play out and the way in which we're attacking and being kind of, crazy. This isn't right. We shouldn't do it this way, as opposed to just saying, look, what actually happened? The president has said that he's considering doing a fireside chat where he would actually read through the phone call. And I'm fairly certain that everyone knows that's hilarious. On both sides of the table, that's a hilarious idea and an idea I'd love to see. And I'm sure the president would enjoy doing that, getting on TV and doing a fireside chat just to talk about something that seems to have exploded to a point that is completely inappropriate. I digress. It makes absolutely no sense to me that we've gotten to a point now where we need to talk about a phone call from June or July in which things were pushed for and didn't happen because we so desperately want to impeach this president. Just let the American people decide if you can be in office again. And by the way, and I know it's been mentioned on the show before, if by some miracle of fate, not only the House but the Senate impeached the president, he could continue to run for office, get reelected, and be sitting as president in 2020, even if all this went the way that the left would like it to go. So that's something we should all remember. If I were a strategist for them, I would beg them to consider the timing of all this and not do it now, not assume that you're impacting his ability to get elected. His supporters are only supporting him now in light of this. Anyone who believes in the president certainly believes that this feels like yet another attempt, a 5th, 6th, 10th, I don't even know how many, but yet another attempt to impeach someone just because you don't like him. And I don't know if this starts a trend where every president from this point forward is just going to be impeached by the other side. They're going to find something, try as hard as they can to find anything that falls outside whatever rule. It doesn't have to be a high crime anymore. That's silly. Let's find anything that's even kind of sort of bad, and let's attack them for that, impeach them for that, and then hope that somehow they can't get back into office, which he would so win an election if he got impeached, by the way. That would probably be the best thing for his campaign. I'm not encouraging anyone to do it. The best thing for his campaign, though, might be to be impeached. All right, I've got to take a break. I have some audio of Chris Wallace talking to Representative Chris Stewart about this exact thing. We're going to talk impeachment a lot today. I do have some other stuff to get to. I don't know if you remember this, but a woman went viral about a month ago for jumping in a lion's den in New York, and she was just arrested for something else. They've been looking for her for a month, and she just got arrested again. More Chad Benson Show. Craig filling in. First, we got to take a break.
No fake outrage here, just the real thing. The Chad Benson Show.
Welcome back to the Chad Benson Show. I'm your host, Craig Collins, filling in for the day. Chad is back on Monday. All right, we're still talking impeachment, something that I wonder, maybe, is there any way that you think if we just didn't talk about it, if everyone just iced it out of, and it would never happen. This is an insane, concept to even propose. But what if we all just didn't talk about it for a day? Would that be enough to make Democrats just give up on it? If it didn't get everyone's attention, because that's the point in all this. The point is well beyond whether or not he committed a crime and deserves to be impeached. The point of this entire thing is let's do whatever we can to hamper his ability to get reelected. And we know, the Democrats know that this will not succeed in the Senate. Just think about that for a quick second. If you were someone in a political office and you were going to great lengths to do something like this, to impeach a president, and you know full well that it won't work, you know full well that it will do nothing to actually impact whether or not he remains in the presidential chair, why do it? I'm just curious, why do it? And actually this goes back to something Nancy Pelosi said quite a while ago. I believe this was a couple months ago. She said at the time, and this was when she was anti-impeachment, which don't we all miss that, Pelosi? But she said at the time that she would only move forward in an attempt to impeach the president if she had bipartisan support. Bipartisan support, something that is unheard of in today's day and age in politics. But that's the only reason she would have moved forward. And a few months later, she decided she's not going to do that. All right, let's get to Chris Wallace. He's talking to Representative Chris Stewart about this. I've got 2 clips of this. Let's hear the first one.
So let me ask you, in the abstract, forget the specifics of this case, do you think there's anything wrong with a president asking another country to investigate his political rivals?
I think a more accurate question, if you allow me, Chris, is there anything criminal and is there anything impeachable about that? Now the truth of the matter is we work with foreign governments all the time to investigate U.S. citizens. We're doing it right now. Attorney General Barr is doing it with foreign governments as they look into the genesis of the 2016 FISA applications and some other things. So that's not unusual at all. But again, I think the more accurate question is this criminal? And I have to tell you that to my knowledge, and maybe they've said something I've missed, although I don't think so, not a single witness has come in and claimed this is actually criminal activity. And the more important question is does it rise to a level of high crime and misdemeanors?
Okay, so you're going to be hearing that a lot over the next few days. It doesn't matter if it's criminal. The left will tell you that it doesn't matter, this impeachment. And they're right about this, actually. I will tell you that. Impeachment in and of itself is a political process. It is not a legal process. It's not one where someone has to commit a crime in order to be impeached. You can impeach someone for essentially anything. If you get enough support within the House and then obviously support in the Senate, you can impeach a president for anything you believe to be impeachable. But within the Constitution, it does mention high crimes and misdemeanors as the intended process, the intended reason to take this on. So if you're a Republican right now trying to have the argument, attempting to convince someone that the president doesn't just deserve impeachment because, he's Donald Trump, he does terrible things, got to get that guy out of office. But if you try to have a rational conversation about what is impeachable, you will mention the word crimes and the word misdemeanors, and you'll be attacked for it. You'll be told, no, sir, impeachment is not a legal thing. He doesn't have to commit a crime. How crazy of an argument is that? That, you know what, maybe it is a crime, maybe it's not. We don't care. This is just something that is inappropriate and can't be done. And granted, I will also say this, because I don't want to sound like I'm just a shill for the president today filling in on the show. It's not a good look to hop on a call with a foreign country and withhold aid in order to get them to investigate the person that happens to be the leading candidate at the time on the other side of the aisle while you're in an election season. That's not an intelligent decision. That's certainly not the kind of thing that anyone should be doing. And there's levels of shadiness to it. But as you'll hear later on in this hour, I'm going to play Steve Bannon, who I know a lot of people have strong opinions of one Steve Bannon. But I think the reason he supports the president so much, and so many other people do, is you believe his intentions. You believe the actual intentions, and they were not just to go after Biden. He's the most famous person tied up in this sort of thing, the investigation that, Trump wanted with the Ukraine on their corruption. But it is just to prevent corruption. So it's a powerful conversation with Representative Chris Stewart for him to mention that it's not an impeachable offense. It's not a crime. Let's hear a little bit more from Chris and Chris.
So I was going to say that really it isn't the issue isn't whether it's criminal, it's whether it's impeachable. So let me ask you directly now. If Democrats were able to make the case the president used his office, I repeat, this is an if, has used his office to get Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden. If that were a credible case, is that an impeachable offense?
It's just not, Chris. It's just not. And as I said, we're doing that right now. We are using the Office of the Presidency to ask other governments to assist us in investigations. There is all sorts of corruption that has gone on in Ukraine since you and I were little boys. That's not a surprise to anyone. And before we release aid, $400 million or more of aid to them, I think it's a perfectly responsible thing to ask. Let's investigate that corruption. And if some of that involves a U.S. person, then I think it's perfectly appropriate to ask questions about that.
And these are the kind of conversations you'll be hearing in the next few days as this investigation continues, because yet again, I want to repeat, this investigation is not complete. It will continue. All right, I've got to talk about this woman who got arrested in New York after jumping into the Bronx Zoo about a month ago. We've got a lot more Chad Benson Show coming up. I'm Greg Collins filling in. He'll be back Monday. I can't wait to share this with you guys because I can't believe she got arrested. How could you be this dumb?
The Chad Benson Show.
Independent thoughts, independent life. This is Chad Benson.
Welcome back to the Chad Benson Show. I'm your host for the day, Craig Collins. Chad will be back on Monday. I have to talk about politician Katie Hill. It's something I have to discuss. I don't want to discuss it per se, but there's so many opinions out there. There's so many moving pieces to this story that I can't help but focus for just a few minutes on it and what is essentially the most obvious narrative in this entire thing, which is that, you know, a double-edged sword. It's not fair. We're being sexist. Just recap for a second what actually occurred. A sitting politician had an affair with a staff member that she's admitted to. And unfortunately, and this is the part that I do feel, you know, maybe there's some argument to be made because these things certainly shouldn't become public. But the photos, the revenge porn aspect in all this, it's a shame. I do want to remind you, though, anyone that's saying that that's solely a thing that happens to women and not to men, and I can't believe I'm bringing this name up on the show today, but I'm going to do it. Anthony Weiner would be another guy who'd raise his hand and be like, no photos wind up out there, even if you're a dude. If you're a political person and a guy, photos wind up out there. And so it should not happen. I'm not going to get on the show today and say that there's any level of correctness to what happened to her, to the fact that all this stuff was made public, to the fact that it's digestible out there with a few clicks of your mouse. That is wrong. That should not happen. But the fact that there's interest in this, which seems to be the way in which you say that there's a double standard, that women are held to this ridiculous standard that men are not held to, is hilarious to me. Bill Clinton would say it's hilarious. People seem to be very interested in what he was doing sexually. People care about these sort of things. Yes, there are other politicians who have been embroiled in scandals very similar to Katie's who did not step down. That was her decision to step down. That was not a decision that she had to make. She could have attempted to ride this out. I've got to work on what words I choose to use when talking about this, but she could have attempted to stay in a political position and figure out how to deal with the problems that were popping up. And I think, and if you've heard out there, that there might be a lot more photos and proof and things that hadn't been shared yet that might be shared. And oh, by the way, one of the two relationships she's accused of having would be an ethics violation. If that relationship, which she has not confirmed, is real, along with the one that she has confirmed with a different staffer is real, then she would have actually violated an ethics thing, and she would need to step down anyway. But there was a huge debate on CNN. I watch the CNN. I shouldn't do it, but I do, and I have quite a few clips from that. But we just have a couple clips here. It's a couple CNN contributors debating this kind of thing. And Margaret Hoover from PBS is actually on there as well, and she's going to shed a little bit, I think, of logic to a conversation where other contributors are going to say things like it's obviously sexist. Let's play that first clip.
But I don't think that there's any wrong with someone doing whatever they want to do in the confines of their home. The problem is that he is the one who has broken the law by sharing those photos. She's not the one who's problematic for having taken them. And I think that this attitude, this is why we have the double standard. Because we're saying, oh, well, she shouldn't have done it. She shouldn't have done it. Well, she was in a loving, committed, married relationship. But it's his criminal act that has publicized all of her dirty laundry.
I just have to push back. This is not a conservative prudishness about taking nude photos. It's an awareness that as a millennial, you have a risk, and you know this, and you've known it since you've been engaging in the internet and since you've been alive, because you're a digital native. That if you have naked photos out there, that is a risk.
Yes. By the way, the other person in that conversation, Aisha Moody Mills, is the one that's going to say, and anytime, look, I don't want to coach people on how to argue on TV anymore, but I think using the word problematic right now makes people tune out of a part of your argument. We need to find a new word to say that I don't agree with what's happened here, because once you use those buzzwords like that was problematic, a lot of people start to hear the things they don't want to hear. So Aisha, maybe steer away from some of those buzzwords that might, make people less responsive to the message. But Margaret makes a great point. She is a younger political person. Katie Hill is someone that grew up in the digital age. She is 32 years old, I believe, so she would know all the dangers of allowing things to be photographed and stored on electronic devices, and that is something she should have avoided. In and of anything else that she should or shouldn't have done, she shouldn't have allowed these things to exist, especially if they'd be enough for her to resign over. If she's not the kind of person, and I'm not saying that you should assume this stuff goes public, but that is what you'd tell your kid, right? That's what anyone right now would tell a loved one who might flirt digitally, who might do any kind of, interactions like that, where a digital copy exists, is consider the risk. Consider the ability for this to be hacked or leaked. And we've seen time and again where these sort of things happen. In that conversation, they actually will point out that there's a substantial difference in being accused of certain things without any photos existing in the world, without any videos and images being consumable by the general public, and being accused of something where you do have that stuff. CNN contributor John Avlon also weighed in on this. Let's go ahead and play that.
Against revenge porn. Do whatever you're going to do to fight against it.
The fact
but don't
that we're
let
not
yourself
talking
be a
about
victim
Duncan
about it.
Hunter right now and
if there
calling
were photos,
on him
if there
to
were tons
resign
of photos of
really
him
makes me sad.
Naked, maybe we would.
He's got to go.
Maybe that is the difference. I don't know.
No, I think photos do change the awareness.
Yes, they do. Photos do change our awareness of something. It changes our focus on it. If Bill Clinton had video of that day with Monica Lewinsky, you don't think people would have cared about that and tried to share it and tried to see it, and it would have had a whole even bigger life than the one it had? Of course, that sort of thing enhances the amount of distraction. And that is the reason that she gave for stepping down. She said that she did not want to be a distraction, and the continued dirtiness of everything going on, the unfairness and illegal actions as far as releasing things that are private and she had no interest in having out there in the world, those types of things, are what made her decide that she did not want to continue her political career, not necessarily whether or not she was ashamed in the fact that she was a married woman who had at least one affair and then maybe one additional relationship that may or may not have been okay with her husband. There's a lot of complicated issues there, but I just take issue with the fact that we can go on TV and say that this entire thing is sexist and it doesn't happen to men, because it does. This happens to men all the time. Do they step down? No. Are there photos of some of the people that they're going to bring up and say that this guy who's currently still in a position had a very similar thing happen to him? No, there's no photos. And so maybe for that reason, it didn't spiral out of control like hers did. And for that reason, other politicians are capable of saying, you know what? I'm going to ride this storm out. I'm going to figure out how to attack back in this situation. And certainly the president and his relationships will be brought up time and again when people discuss this, if they continue to do that. And my only reaction to that is the same one I've had to everything else. This is a question for anyone out there. And I'm not saying, I'm not sure how exactly I want to pose this question, because I don't want to, allude to things that I think are or aren't true, things that did or didn't happen. But if Stormy Daniels and the president had some sort of photographic or video proof of their relationship, do you think people would be interested in seeing it? That's just a question. I don't want to answer the question. I'm just curious what you think. All right, let's move on. Another thing that's been in the news recently, the president has said he kind of wants to hold a fireside chat and read the conversation between him and the president of Ukraine. He would like to just sit down and do that. And these fireside chats have been used mostly in much more important situations to talk directly to the American people. But to me, it does sound, I'm going to agree with Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon, which I hate saying those words, but I am going to agree with them that it would be entertainment and people would watch it. But I think they might also learn something if the president did do it. But this happened the other night. This is Chris and Don laughing at the idea of a fireside chat, which, again, I think we all agree on both sides would be entertainment.
Can I say something? People are going to get mad at me.
Oh, nobody will hear.
Can we please have a fireside chat? It would be so amazing. I'm laughing, but he loses power. It would be really amazing.
By the way, I took out the interaction between Chris and Don where they're doing their impressions of the president and saying that he would go off on tangents while reading the phone call. But I'd watch. I would 100%. What do you think the ratings would be for a fireside chat where the president did this? And honestly, do you actually think that anyone's opinion would be changed even then? Do you think the people that hate him would maybe listen? He's an entertaining guy. He does entertaining things. Are they all appropriate? No. Would I do them all? Absolutely not. If my friend at the bar wanted to say some of the stuff that the president has said, would I encourage him not to say it? For sure. But does that mean that I'm not going to consume it and watch it? No. I would watch this fireside chat and I would enjoy the hell out of it, much like Chris and Don would. And then, of course, we'd have very different opinions of what took place. But it's a hilarious thing now that I even see them. They seem to be joyous about it, as though it would be some sort of misstep. I don't know if the president, and I don't mean this because I agree with everything he does, but I don't know if the president can make a misstep. I honestly don't. I think that he's immune to missteps because of how thoroughly enjoyable he can be to the people that support him, how much they can laugh with him. And I think if he did do something like that, he would have a crap ton of fun with it. All right, I have to get to this because I've been teasing it a couple times, and I want to talk about it. I don't know if you remember this, but about a month ago, a video went viral of a woman that called herself, I believe, like some sort of lion expert. She is not in any way a lion expert, but she believes herself to be one. She jumped into the lion cage at the Bronx Zoo, and video went viral. There were a bunch of people at the zoo at the time just shooting video of her, and she's standing in the cage with the lion just a few feet away from her, waving at him and being like, hey, how are you doing? And she's apparently a lion enthusiast as well. Well, there's an update to this story because after a month of not having any idea who she was, what she was doing, or, pretty much anything about her, there was a search for her without a lot of information out there. She has been apprehended. She tried to shoplift from a store in New Jersey, and she had to appear in court to defend herself in a shoplifting case. And people were like, wait a minute, you're the person who climbed into the exhibit at the Lion's Den. You're that lady. So Maya Autry is out there in the world now, identified and on video, discussing, at least I think defending herself for now in the case in New Jersey. But I'm sure that the New York police will have quite a few questions for her and her enthusiasm for lions. I can't believe she's alive, by the way. If you go watch that video from a month ago and you see how close she is, how fearless she is, I mean, I don't know. The woman just seems to me to be a very special breed of human. And a month after going viral, by the way, she claimed she had no idea that the police were looking for her. This is a viral video that people all over the world saw, and it was from her own social media pages. And she was like, oh, you guys saw that? I didn't know anybody cared. Well, we cared, and now you've wound up getting picked up for something else. So thank you so much for continuing to live. I can't wait to see what she does next. Maybe we can let her off. Maybe we will forgive this shoplifting thing if she does another death-defying stunt. Maybe she even does it on something like America's Got Talent. Let's put her on the show next year and forgive all of her crimes if she's willing to maybe ride in the back of a lion for 10 minutes. That's must-watch TV. Maybe that goes right before the fireside chat. I'm Craig Collins in for Chad Benson. A lot more show coming up. Stick with us.
Don't let the Washington Beltway strangle you. This is where the exhausted majority comes to refuel, realign, and reevaluate. This is Chad Benson.
Welcome back to the Chad Benson Show. I'm Craig Collins filling in for the rest of today. He'll be back on Monday. All right, there's a funny story out of Kankakee, Illinois, that I think maybe is also the genesis of a great idea. A fugitive was on the run from the police. I don't think it was for anything all that serious. The guy was 25 years old. I think he failed to appear from, some sort of drunk involved thing, but I don't think anyone was injured. So again, I laugh at this story, and I'm not making light of the fact that he was a criminal, but I think it's interesting what happened. So the guy's 25 years old, and he goes on social media and sees that the police have shared his wanted photo, and they just so happened to share it on Halloween. So he comments, and by the way, I don't understand this now. This is a thing that you'll see every few weeks in the news. A person who's wanted by the police will comment on the post on social media looking for them. But so he did it. Brandon Conti went to the post and said, "Hey, it's Halloween. Where's my costume?" So the police responded back by poorly photoshopping a sailor's outfit onto Brandon, and they said, "Ahoy," in response, and then he turned himself in. He turned himself in maybe because he thought they were funny, but more importantly, and here's where the genesis of the idea really intrigues me, what if we did this for any criminal? What if you started to Photoshop embarrassing outfits on these people? What if we pushed this to the 10th degree and dressed them up like American gladiators or, I don't know, anything? Little Bo Peep becomes a costume that could make sense a lot of times. I think a lot more people would turn themselves in today's digital age if the photo out there in the world makes you look ridiculous. If the photo of you is in a ridiculous costume or maybe you're doing something stupid, we can Photoshop all kinds of things in. The only thing that matters in identifying someone is their face, so keep that clear and do a bunch of ridiculous things with the photo and even be honest that it's Photoshopped. The internet doesn't care. They'll digest it, they'll share it, they'll run wild with it, and people will probably turn themselves into a much higher degree like this guy did because, hey, I don't want to be out there dressed like an idiot sailor. I got to get that down. I got to come in so you take that photo away. And it could exist forever, so maybe it'll even prevent more crimes if people do this. One other thing that caught my eye that I found interesting, about 10 years ago yesterday, so on Halloween in 2009, the last McDonald's closed in Iceland. So it's been 10 years since that place shut down, and the last person to buy a meal there, a burger and fries, decided not to eat it. He decided the appropriate thing to do in 2009 was to put it up as a live stream on the internet because, and I quote, he had heard that McDonald's products don't really deteriorate. That it's the kind of thing that, you can leave sitting for months or maybe years, and it will look pretty much the same as when you bought it. Well, it's 10 years since that's happened. The burger and fries have been moved to a museum, a national museum in Iceland, and they are still live streaming on TV. If you want to go check that out, you can do it right now just by Googling the last McDonald's burger ever to be served in Iceland, and the National Museum of Iceland is displaying it. What do you think of that? Is that like the epitome of 2019? Does that get us to the point where maybe the internet has tipped that a guy in Iceland has a sandwich from 10 years ago that is so vastly important and so popular online that he live streamed it and a museum wanted in on it? I don't know if this also encourages McDonald's to go back to Iceland. Maybe at a certain point, maybe if we get to 25 or 30 years and the burger still looks relatively the same and people start to really question what's in the products, maybe McDonald's opens a bunch of stores so this finally goes away. But it's a surreal thing to me that in 2019 people have interest in this, that this is a news story, and that for whatever reason it's the kind of thing that, hey, we could come up with another, let's do that as a group. Go ahead and go to our Facebook page and come up with another viral idea similar to this. What can we live stream? Maybe don't go too far with that. Maybe that question is a little bit too open. Chad will be very upset when he gets back on Monday. He's like, what are all these comments on our Facebook page? But what can we live stream? What food item that, people might want to watch for 10 years? And it's not even a photo, it's a live stream. You can go see how it looks right at this exact moment. I'm Craig Collins, filling in for the Chad Benson Show. I can't wait to see how his Facebook page looks on Monday. And I'm positive that he'll have comments for me and ask me, never ever do that again, Craig. Don't tell them to ask us with the live stream. I'll talk to you guys soon. Enjoy your weekend. Chad's back on Monday.
This is the Chad Benson Show.